Good evening. I'm Robert MacNeil in New York.
And I'm Roger Mudd in Washington. After the news summary, we begin a series of reports on the new budget plan. Tonight, taxes and who pays what. Then correspondent Paul Solomon revisits a town in Massachusetts to gauge the economic climate. Charles Krause talks about America with a group of Russian high schoolers. And Ann Taylor Fleming has an essay about Vincent Foster.
Major funding for the MacNeil Lehrer NewsHour has been provided by PepsiCo. And by the Archer Daniels Midland Company. ADM, supermarket to the world. And by New York Life, yet another example of New York Life's wise investment philosophy. And by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, and by the annual financial support from viewers like you.
The 1993 Budget Act became law today. President Clinton signed the bill in a ceremony on the White House South Lawn. The budget is expected to cut $496 billion from the deficit over 5 years through a series of spending cuts and tax increases. It was so controversial that it passed the House and Senate by the smallest possible margins. We'll take a look at taxes in the bill right after the news summary. Also at the White House today, Judge Ruth Bader Ginsburg became Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the second woman ever to serve on the Supreme Court. She spoke about that during the East Room ceremony.
A system of justice will be the richer for diversity of background and experience. It will be the poorer in terms of appreciating what is at stake and the impact of its judgments if all of its members are cast from the same mold.
Justice Ginsburg replaces Justice Byron White, who retired last month. Roger?
The U.S. Park Police said today that White House lawyer Vincent Foster's death on July 20th was a suicide and that there was no evidence of foul play. The police also released the text of a note written by Foster and found in a briefcase in his office a week after he died. The note read in part, "I was not meant for the job or the spotlight of public life in Washington. Here, ruining people is considered sport." The chief of the Park Police discussed the investigation at a Washington news conference.
The condition of the scene, the medical examiner's findings, and the information gathered clearly indicate that Mr. Foster committed suicide. The information gathered from associates, relatives, and friends provide us with enough evidence to conclude that Mr. Foster was anxious about his work. He was distressed to a degree that he took his own life.
As Deputy White House Counsel, Foster had played a major role in handling the shakeup of the White House Travel Office. He said in his note that he had made mistakes from ignorance, inexperience, and overwork, but he said he knew of no intentional violation of law or standard of conduct by anyone in the White House.
CIA Director James Woolsey flew to the capital of the former Soviet Republic of Georgia today to retrieve the body of a slain American diplomat. U.S. officials would not comment on reports that the man, 45-year-old Fred Woodruff, was an agent of the CIA, but the Woolsey trip was believed to be tacit acknowledgement that he was. Woolsey was met at the country's airport by President Edward Shevardnadze. Woodruff was with Shevardnadze's head of security when he was shot by an unknown assailant on Sunday. He'd been on temporary duty in Georgia, reportedly to train bodyguards for Shevardnadze.
UN peacekeepers in Bosnia this evening said Serb forces have now retaken key mountainside positions overlooking Sarajevo. They had started transferring control of those positions to UN forces yesterday under the threat of NATO air attacks. The Bosnian Serb leader Radovan Karadzic insisted the withdrawal would be complete in another 24 hours. The territorial dispute led to another postponement of the peace talks in Geneva, which are aimed at the partition of Bosnia. Meanwhile, Karadzic told the Associated Press that if a single NATO bomb strikes a Serbian position, there would be no more talks. The NATO allies yesterday agreed to launch airstrikes if the Serbs did not lift their siege of the Bosnian capital. A critically wounded 5-year-old Bosnian girl was in stable condition in a London hospital today. The girl, whose plight became the focus of international attention this weekend, was evacuated from Sarajevo yesterday after a 6-day delay blamed on United Nations red tape. She was wounded in the abdomen and the spine in a mortar attack that killed her mother. The publicity surrounding her suffering produced offers to help 40 or so other seriously ill patients in Sarajevo. A UN official said those victims could be evacuated in a matter of days.
A State Department official today said that U.S. troops could remain in Somalia for at least another year and possibly longer. Ambassador David Shin told reporters in Washington one obstacle to withdrawal was warlord Mohammed Farah Aidid, whose forces he blamed for the killing of 4 U.S. soldiers on Sunday. Shin said it was very important that the fugitive warlord be removed from the equation. There are about 4,000 U.S. troops in the UN's Somalia force, which is there to maintain stability in the country while a government is reestablished.
The productivity of American workers fell during the second quarter of the year at an annual rate of 2.5%. It dropped at a 1.6% rate during the first quarter. The April, May, June decline was the worst in more than 4 years. Economists argue that productivity must increase for living standards to improve or at least remain stable. That's it for the news summary. Just ahead on the NewsHour, adding up the budget bill, bouncing back from hard times, discovering America, and questioning an untimely death.
Tonight we begin a short series of reports intended to help clarify the complicated budget bill signed into law today by President Clinton. Tonight we look at what the tax changes mean and don't mean to individual taxpayers. In other reports, we'll examine the impact on business and on the economy more generally. We begin with an excerpt from the President's remarks at today's signing.
For 5 months, the American people heard too little about the real debate and too much from those who oversimplified and often downright misrepresented the questions of tax increases and spending cuts because they had narrow economic or political or personal reasons to do so. So today, as we sign this landmark legislation, I say again, now we can talk about the national interest, how this plan will begin to bring the change we need in America, how we can have economic revival and hope if this is a beginning and we move forward from here. We now have real fairness in the tax code, with over 80% of the new tax burden being borne by those who make over $200,000 a year, with the middle class asked to pay only $3 a month, and with the tax cut to working families with children who make under $27,000 a year. By expanding this earned income tax credit to working families, and especially to the working poor, this Congress has made history by enabling us to say, for the first time, now if you work hard and you have children in your home and you spend 40 hours a week at work, you can be a successful worker and a successful parent, and you will be lifted out of poverty.
Janice Johnson is the Director of Tax Policy for the New York State Society of Certified Public Accountants. Ms. Johnson, thank you for coming. According to a Washington Post ABC News poll, half of Americans think their taxes are going up somewhat, and a fifth of Americans think they're going up a great deal. Can they all be right?
I think most Americans will not see anything increase other than their gas tax, and the gas tax won't be dramatic.
What would the gas tax be for the average driving that Americans do?
Well, if you think average driving is maybe 500 gallons a year, that's about a $20 gas tax, and that is not that hefty a burden on energy consumption.
All right. So, apart from the gas tax, let's look at some specific categories. The President just mentioned the working poor. What difference is the new tax bill going to make to them?
If you look at a working poor family that has 2 children, married couple, they make $10,000 a year, they already don't pay any income tax. When you take their personal exemptions and itemized deductions, they're down in a level where they don't pay income tax. What there is for them is an earned income credit, a refundable credit they actually get back to increase their total income. Right now, in '93, it will be somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,500 for that family with 2 children. In '94, and one of the differences is here, this is not retroactive like some of the tax rates. In '94, it will go up by about $600. They'll get about $2,100. So that is a significant increase for them in their overall income.
So the only other impact on them will be the gas tax we just...
Right. If they actually own a car and are paying gas tax, there will be a little there.
Right. Let's move on to people who might be called middle class and discuss the impact on them.
Right. Well, if you look at a couple that has $70,000, say, in gross income, that's with salary and any savings they have.
Probably made up of at least two wage earners doing that.
Probably in Middle America, you have two wage earners. Say they have two children. You're probably looking at deductions and personal exemptions in the neighborhood of $20,000 if they're paying state taxes, they're paying mortgage interest. All those things together added up, probably $20,000. So they've got taxable income of about $50,000. This law does not kick in for married couples until their taxable income goes over $140,000.
So no change for these
No change
people.
other than the gas tax, that's it.
Other than the gas tax on
Right.
them. But there are changes for retired people. And let's look at a couple of categories of retired people.
Okay, on the retired people, a lot of retirees don't really have that much in taxable income. So you start looking at what do they have in income, what do they have in Social Security income, and whether or not that Social Security income is taxable. If you've got a retiree with, say, $20,000 in pension income and $20,000 in Social Security income, they're not going to pay any additional tax if they're a married couple filing jointly. The Social Security increase is not going to affect until you've got $44,000 in income.
In taxable income.
In income that includes tax-exempt interest for this purpose, because your tax-exempt interest is counted in income to determine whether Social Security is taxable. But assuming we've only got pension and Social Security.
Tax-exempt interest would be interest from
municipal bonds.
Say some investments that were tax-free investments.
Right.
Well, let's look at a couple who have some investments.
Okay, then if you've got this couple with investments and they've got another $20,000 in income from investments, so that in total their income is $60,000, then their Social Security is going to be hit by the new rule. The new rule tells you that 85% of the Social Security benefits at this level pretty much will be taxable, instead of 50% under the old law.
Everybody pays tax on 50% of their Social Security now.
Right. So another 35% for these people will be taxable. So in this couple's case, another $7,000 in taxable income will be there.
With a tax result of what?
With a tax result, their maximum rate hasn't changed. It's still 31%. So it's another about $2,000 in taxes, a little more than that.
Yeah, which is a considerable amount for somebody at that.
It is a considerable amount, but I think the Clinton administration was looking at this. Treasury estimates only 13% of retirees are in this level that will be hit. And generally, retirees have a little more disposable income than some other segments of the population, and they felt, again, based on ability to pay, this was probably a segment of the population that could afford to pay a little more in tax to make up the budget deficit. That was the thinking as they saw it.
And so they would be, and the only other thing in their case, they would be affected by the gas tax as well.
Right, the gas tax is across the board for automobile drivers.
Okay. Let's go on to some categories of upper income people. Okay.
If you've got a couple that has two kids and, say, has $250,000 in gross income, you're looking at all salary income in this case, say, they're probably going to have in the neighborhood of $50,000 in deductions and personal exemptions against that. Now, what they'll have probably is mortgage interest, they'll have state income taxes, they may have some charitable contributions, a few other things like that. And they will get part of their personal exemptions, but they will lose about half of those, not because of this law, but because of a change in the law a couple of years ago. What this law did is it made that loss of part of your personal exemptions at upper income levels permanent.
And the personal exemptions, you mean the amount you can deduct for dependents?
Right. For each person you have in the family, the husband, the wife, and the two children, you get a $2,350 personal exemption in 1993, $2,350. And these people will lose about half that benefit at this income level. They will also lose some of their itemized deductions because there are limitations on itemized deductions for upper income people. And in their case, they'll probably lose about $3,500 in itemized deductions. They will also, and this is another quirk in the law, the Medicare tax now applies to every dollar of salary income. It used to cut off at $135,000 of salary. Now it goes all the way up. That tax on the employee is 1.45%, about 1.5%. So in the case of this couple, assuming everything's earned income, they're going to pay about $940 in additional Medicare tax. So overall, they're going to pay about $3,000 in additional income tax, and they're going to pay the $940 in Medicare tax, and they're going to pay the gas tax.
And the reason they're going to pay more in income tax is because their income comes above the $140,000 level. So they would be paying that addition, and that raises the rate from
31% to 36% in this case, because you've got $60,000, the difference between $200,000 in their taxable income and the $140,000 cutoff, subject to this new 36% rate, another 5% that they weren't paying in the past.
So the net difference to them would be what you think about?
The net difference in taxes is probably going to be about $4,000 when you factor in the gas tax.
$4,000 to people who have gross income of $250,000.
Right, and married filing jointly with 2 kids.
Yes.
Now keep in mind, single people, all these cutoffs are lower, so that a single person starts paying the 36% rate at $115,000 in taxable income.
Right. We've kept this to couple with 2 kids just to keep it all the same all the way through. Go up higher now to another category of people with higher income.
Well, if you look at somebody, say, with $600,000 in gross income, and assume they've got $100,000 in itemized deductions because they have a bigger house, they've got a lot more mortgage interest, they may be a little more charitably inclined, and they're certainly paying much bigger state taxes. So they've got $500,000 in taxable income, $500,000. Under the old law, 92, they would have paid $147,750 about in income tax. This new law is going to require them to pay $27,000 in additional income tax. That's made up of the difference between the first $250,000 in taxable income less the $140,000 where the cutoff for the old rates are. That difference of $110,000 is another 5% tax because of the 36% rate. And then the law imposes a surcharge on taxpayers who earn or who have taxable income of over $250,000. That surcharge is equal to a 39.6% income tax rate. So they're paying 8.6% additional tax on the whole $250,000 that exceeds the $250,000 cutoff. So their income tax bill has gone up enormously. And additionally, people in this income bracket don't get any personal exemptions. They've lost the benefit entirely.
Was that under the old law as it came into effect?
It was under the old law. What this law did, it was supposed to end in about 95, and we were supposed to go back to full benefits from personal exemptions and full benefits from itemized deductions. This law is another way of raising revenues, extended permanently that rule. So now you always have a phase out of personal exemptions and of itemized deductions. You lose part of them.
Yeah.
So they've got that for an additional $27,000 in taxes, as well as, assuming all this is earned income, there's another $5,300 in Medicare tax on that employee. And so that's a big tax burden when you look at it.
Yeah. So go up to, finally, we have one more category here.
Yeah. Say you have somebody on Wall Street is the most likely example of this, earning $1,200,000 in just earned income. And say they've got $200,000 in itemized deductions. One of the things you see is itemized deductions tend to drop a little bit in this category because you don't have as much mortgage interest. The house may be paid for. You may have more charitable, and you've got more state taxes. So their taxable income is $1 million. In that case, in 92, they would have paid about $303,000 in tax in federal income tax. In 1993, they're going to owe an additional $70,000 in income taxes, because everything over $250,000, $750,000 of this taxable income is taxed an additional 8.6%, and then the difference between the $140,000 cutoff and $250,000 is taxed an additional 5%. That's a very big tax increase, and I think what you're seeing is these tax increases, in most cases, are hitting people who truly have big incomes to the major extent. They're the ones paying a much larger tax bill than they have in the past. Now, additionally, if this person is earning all their income, they're going to have over $12,500 in additional Medicare tax. And that's a huge Medicare tax to tack onto this. So the total additional tax burden is about $82,500 for this person.
But for most people, all these people in the 140,000 above are under 2% of the taxpayers, you say. Going back to most people in the country, there will be no change in the withholding for them this year next year?
There should be no change in the withholding. There should be no change in their tax. There should be no difference to them when they file their tax return because these cutoffs are fairly high. And what this bill did to help people who are affected by these rate increases, and the fact that these rate increases are retroactive to January 1st, 1993, at the last minute they said, we're going to give you a calculation to make of what tax is due to the rate increase. We'll send it out with your forms package. You'll be able to do it then. And you can spread that tax liability over a 3-payment period. You can pay a third of it on April 15th, 94, a third April 15th, 95, and a third April 15th, 96. So they've tried to make the burden of this additional payment as painless as they can make it.
But even for the people at 250,000, which is well into the 2% and would be a large part of that 2%, I guess, you say that the additional tax burden on the income tax is going to be about $2,000.
Well, it's about, actually, and the income tax is about $3,000.
$3,000.
So in all with Medicare tax, it's about $4,000. So yeah, they're paying a substantial amount, but if you spread that amount over a 3-year period or 3-payment period, it's not huge. The real burden falls on the really high-income people.
Yeah. Well, Ms. Johnson, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Still ahead, a small town on the rebound. America seen through Russian eyes and an Ann Taylor Fleming essay. At today's budget signing ceremony, President Clinton said his plan had already begun to work. Interest rates have gone down, he said, because progress has been made on the deficit reduction front. But does this necessarily mean the long-awaited economic upswing has finally begun? Tonight, business correspondent Paul Salmon of WGBH Boston tries to find out with his report from Southbridge, Massachusetts. Over the years, Salmon has used Southbridge and its historic restoration called Old Sturbridge Village as a gauge of the economy's ups and downs. Here's his report.
This is Old Sturbridge Village, a living history museum that recreates life as it was lived in New England about 160 years ago. We first started coming here in 1990 to look in on the recession, which hit New England especially hard. This is Massachusetts, and we're not far from both Rhode Island and Connecticut. But we return today to look in on economic recovery, and why this one seems so different from economic recoveries of the past. And speaking of the past, let's start with a little living history.
Back in the 1830s, America's very first industrial slump meant tough times even down on the farm. But people kept to their business, and slowly the economy came back. A recovery that contented nearly everyone. The economy's been going up and down ever since, including the recession we found here in the fall of 1990. At Old Sturbridge Village, attendance was down, layoffs up. And we found hard times just about everywhere we went. From downtown...
We are in a dying situation in Southbridge.
...to the neighborhood defense firm...
We're keeping spending under control, anticipating a pretty rough 1991 as far as the economy is concerned.
...to the local paper.
If this isn't a recession, I don't know what a recession is.
It's now 3 years later, and finally, for Lorne Guillaume, the presses are rolling. He's making money for the first time since 1989. But publisher Guillaume hasn't seen the sharp uptick, the fast growth that's characterized recoveries of the past.
I thought the bands would be blaring a lot sooner than today, and I was planning on it, but it just hasn't happened. And I don't think it is going to happen. I mean, I'm sort of less optimistic about a recovery anytime soon.
The nearby Holyoke paper died, waiting for the economy to sharply turn back up. Guillaume, a journalist, is in business today because newspapers are no longer his main source of income. 2/3 of his business is printing and inserting ad flyers, often for supermarkets.
I think you just have to look at your company as, in our case, a delivery system company.
This change in definition means Guillaume's now more a printer than a publisher. He'll soon be printing and inserting specific flyers for individual households, with a special offer on pies, say. if the store's electronic tracking system shows you just haven't been buying enough baked goods lately.
We're going to do that off of these inserting machines that you see downstairs. And those machines, I think ultimately, it won't take that long. They'll be able to be just as sophisticated in breaking down to the household rather than the geographical territory.
You're excited about this?
I am. I think it's a challenge, and yeah, it is. It's exciting.
So to effect his own recovery, Guillaume had to redefine his business. He's got a delivery system, not just a newspaper. A few miles away is another company looking to redefine its vision, Galileo, the local defense contractor. The company's main source of income was making night vision devices for the military, using fiber optics glass technology. But the recession, combined with defense cutbacks, slashed the company's sales by 25% between 1990 and 1992, resulting in massive layoffs. Galileo needed a new line of work.
That was the crux of the problem. How do we survive when all we know how to do is make components for military night vision devices? We had to reinvent ourselves from scratch in order to survive.
So Galileo, like the local newspaper, had to figure out what it was good at that could be sold in the changing world of the 1990s.
What we ended up defining ourselves as is we are in the signal acquisition and delivery business. We are not in the night vision business. We do signal acquisition and delivery for our customer.
This is simply tech talk for the basic act of moving electronic signals, like images or data, from one place to another, here through glass instead of wire. And by redefining itself, Galileo's sales have gone from 30% non-military to 94% today. But recovery in the 1990s takes more than just redefining and repackaging what you're already doing. You've got to find new applications. For instance, these night vision magnifying devices, which didn't meet military specs and which Handley gave out as keepsakes. They might conceivably have a civilian use.
When we were here first, you gave us these little sort of reject scopes to take home as a sort of a memento. And I gave one to my daughter, who brought it to the fish market, and the guy came to me one day when I was buying fish and said, listen, can you get me these as novelty items for Christmas? And I came back, I called you up and said, listen, there might be a market for this stuff. And you said it cost how much?
$350.
Right, so it was like out of the question as a novelty item, and that's what I told him. Can you imagine ever getting the cost down to the point that you could make those things into novelty items?
Absolutely. We have actually done some focus groups and done some market tests looking at those particular devices. I think that's going to happen someday. I also think the way we make that product will be completely different than the way we make it today. In order to get to where we have to be as a company and as a nation, you have to think what we call outside the box.
When Bill Handley talks about thinking outside the box, this happens to be the box he's talking about. It's a famous brain teaser, which we're going to use to explain an economics lesson, and therefore we're going to make use of the invisible hand. Now, the way it works is you take a pencil or a pen, and without it ever leaving the paper, you have to draw 4 lines such that they go through all the dots. So let's try one. Up, there, 3, 4. No, that doesn't do it. Here's another one. 1, 2, 3, 4, no. But you see, if you think outside the box, what you do is up, outside the box, down, outside the box, across, and then up, and you've got all the dots covered. That's thinking outside the box.
In business terms, this means you don't confine yourself to the rules as you always understood them. You look for new answers, unorthodox solutions. In Galileo's case, thinking outside the box caused them to start making surgical vision devices, inexpensive arthroscopes for knee surgery. And while the company has yet to match its record sales of 1990, Handley's sure he's on the road to recovery without military intervention. The successes of Handley and Lorne Guillaume, however, are not the result of the long-expected robust recovery so much as individual firms changing with the changing times. But can every business get outside the box? What about Old Sturbridge Village itself? Isn't it, by definition, a prisoner of the past? Well, the folks at Old Sturbridge Village know that change must come, and they're trying, raising and selling plants from the 19th century, for example, running a special Halloween night.
But even if it changes with the times, as Galileo and the publisher have, there'd still be a problem we haven't even mentioned yet, the creation of new jobs. At its peak, the newspaper company employed 350 people. Today, it's down to 257. And while things are much improved up at Galileo, the company isn't hiring. Galileo is still at a lean and mean level of employment.
One of the things you must do to your company is become more productive, if you will, when you go from a military to a commercial environment. We have approximately tripled our productivity measured in sales dollars per employee per year in the last 10 years.
Productivity means that firms are doing more work with fewer workers. This wouldn't be a big problem for the recovery if it were happening just at Galileo and the newspaper, but it's happening everywhere, even at American Optical. For a century, this company was the region's principal employer. At its peak, 6,000 people worked at the AO plant. Now, only 1,300 people work for American Optical in Southbridge. Most of the work is done overseas. It's no surprise, then, that even in recovery, Southbridge has a 15% unemployment rate, highest in Massachusetts, just as it had back in 1990. Because in this recovery, companies, even the ones that are doing well, are just not adding jobs. As a result, Southbridge, like so many communities, is now looking to the employer of last resort, Uncle Sam.
Time is how you get from here to tomorrow.
In fact, recently, a campaign was launched to lure defense jobs to town.
July 1995. The American Optical facility has been fully reincarnated as a modern four-building campus, accommodating more than 7,000 employees of the Defense Finance and Accounting Service. Because the
town manager Florence Chandler led the charge.
You have a community that would welcome the employees here. You have a community that has been 100% behind this. You have the entire region here who has written 10,000 letters to the president. I delivered them personally. I know, believe me, there were 10,000. Each of us took one suitcase full of our clothes and one suitcase full of letters on those planes, and they were heavy. So I know that the spirit of this community is behind it.
Impressive, but should Southbridge win these jobs, someplace else will lose them. In fact, the Pentagon is consolidating its accounting offices and cutting jobs overall. In other words, this recovery seems like a zero-sum game, with communities fighting each other for what jobs there are instead of creating new ones. Our last stop, then, the two economists featured in our earlier trips here, to ask why this recovery is so weak, so jobless. First, Nick Perna of Shawmut Bank, who assured us last time that the economy was poised to take off.
Where did you go astray?
I thought it was my evil twin who must have said that. Where did I go astray? I've been asking myself that question. And I think one factor is that, and this is particularly important for New England, that the defense cuts that came even harder than most people thought would happen. But the second thing is, this is a national phenomenon, a national problem. This is the first time we ever tried to get out of a recession without some fiscal stimulus.
Without the government printing money, essentially, or spending it.
Without a tax cut or a spending increase program.
Now, this is a traditional economist's view of our slow recovery. The government, constrained, of course, by the deficit, just isn't doing enough. And there are other explanations. Automation has taken away jobs. So has foreign competition. Healthcare costs are so high that employers simply can't afford to take on new employees. But we've also got to include a less conventional explanation. 3 years ago, we ended our first recession story here at MIT with Professor John Sterman, who accurately predicted a slow, jobless recovery. That prediction was based on his view that the economy rises and falls in long 50 to 60-year cycles. He dates the bottom of the last cycle from the Depression and World War II, after which America in the 50s, 60s, and 70s built, rebuilt, and eventually overbuilt. And he says that we've been working off our overcapacity in factories, office buildings, and the like, in fits and starts, for the last 20 years.
That means you now have industries that are overexpanded. They have to downsize. Every company is faced with intense competitive pressure. They have to downsize to stay alive. But what happens when they do? You have unemployed workers, they've lost their income, they've lost their hope, they cut back on their consumption, they try to pay down their debts, and that reduces demand. So even as companies seek to reduce employment to balance their capacity with the demand, they create a side effect which lowers demand for everybody and intensifies and prolongs the depression.
For John Sturman, then, the economy is still under a cloud, much as America was during its first downturn back in the 1830s. Firms like those we've seen that redefine and invest for a very different future may be harbingers of the next long-term recovery, but by Sturman's analysis, and others, that could take quite a while. In other words, the story of this recovery is to be continued.
During the Cold War, they were called cultural exchanges, Soviet delegations of ballet dancers or scientists or agronomists visiting the United States, but always watched over by the KGB. But with the end of the Cold War comes something entirely different. More than 1,000 high school students from the former Soviet Union living and studying in the United States under an exchange program paid for by the U.S. government. Correspondent Charles Krause reports.
Who would have ever thought just a few years ago that the U.S. government would pay to bring high school students from the old Soviet Union to live and study in the United States? Even more improbable that authorities in the Kremlin would have let them come. But there they were on the steps of the Capitol last January, the first of more than 1,000 high school students from the old Soviet Union who come to the U.S. this year. They're called Bradley Kids because it was Senator Bill Bradley of New Jersey who was the principal sponsor of the new exchange program that brought them here. Proud of his kids, the senator had some words of wisdom for them when he met with them at the start of their visit last winter.
And don't hesitate to ask questions. Everybody will take your questions like it's a real opportunity to answer your questions. So ask a lot of questions, you know.
From Washington, the young exchange students from Russia and Kazakhstan fanned out across the United States. The American Field Service arranged host families for them in upstate New York, Ohio, Minnesota, Missouri, Florida, California, and even Alaska.
When is from? What date exactly? Like
Saturday, May 22nd.
Sergei Kuzmin from Moscow was typical. He lived with the Lang family near Minneapolis. Early each morning, Sergei had breakfast with his American parents, Jim and Ruth Lang. Then drove to school with his American sister, Alicia. At Westonka High School, Sergei learned to love American computers.
Yes!
After school, he tried to learn to play golf. By the time Sergei and the other students were reunited in Washington a few weeks ago, there were lots of questions and stories to tell.
We describe your countries as the newly independent states, the NIS. Is that a...
Joe Duffy, the new head of the U.S. Information Agency, wanted to know what to call the old Soviet Union. When our turn came, shortly before the Bradley kids left for home, we asked them what their biggest misconception of this country was before they came to the United States.
We all thought that it's so free, you know, land of opportunities, and it's free, no restrictions, no nothing like that. But it's not true. People, I mean, have the rules, have the laws, you know, to follow, and even family traditions, they're pretty strict compared to our families sometimes, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. So you don't think people here are as free as you thought they were?
Right. Actually, I think everybody would agree with
that. Yeah, I was
expecting
expecting more freedom here.
But freedom of what kind? What were you expecting?
Just there are so many restrictions and regulations.
For example?
I don't know the ID thing about the bars, 21 age and all this.
And yet we think of your country as being very regimented, as being, certainly when the communists were in power, as being everyone had to do things a certain way.
Yes,
that was
maybe
it.
like several years ago we had to wear those uniforms, but like now we can wear whatever we want. And like here.
This is kind of stereotype. Everybody was saying that, well, you can do only the thing that somebody is saying to you. Like you had this Communist Party and they were saying to you what you have to do, that many people said me this. It's not the truth. I mean, I felt here this way because they're not free at all. They can't really do the things that they want because maybe their parents think they're afraid too much of crime or something. I don't know. Just they're not free at all. They're not trusted too much.
In Russia, everybody acts more mature, I think. Like children, they more They want to be more, independent.
Here you have curfews, you can be grounded.
Yeah, in Russia there is nothing like grounded.
Maybe it's good, who knows? I mean, because if you have the laws, then there's less crime and less mass, you know.
Okay, but
that was misconception. We expected different, you know.
But how about things like racism, things like, you know, the differences between, economic differences between classes? I know that at least in the old days in your country, not so very long ago, this was the kind of thing that was said about America, that it was a racist country, that it was a capitalist country where people were starving, poor people, and that sort of thing. Did you sense that there is a lot of racism?
Yeah, because like before I came here, I thought that racism like from 60s going down, and now it's going to be much better. Yeah, but I came to school, like everybody, just everybody except like a few girls, they were just saying that some jokes or some, you know, they were just saying something all the time about blacks or how they don't like them or, you know, like, and that was really surprised.
Yeah, I found more racism as I thought before.
I found less racism.
Really?
I found less. I think I found more.
So it's kind of split, isn't it?
Yeah,
some more, some less.
Depends with whom you communicate.
Right.
Do you think that Americans are rich, by and large? Are they?
No.
No.
I think, I remember we were talking about misconceptions. So I remember just one of misconceptions was that people in Russia, many people in Russia, think that Americans are wealthy, healthy, and happy. You just imagine this that American stereotype: a huge house, a happy American jogging or working in the backyard. That was one of the misconceptions.
How do the schools here compare to the schools in Russia and Kazakhstan in terms of the kind of things, the difficulty, the advanced education?
I studied personally much harder in my Moscow school than I did here.
Give me a couple of examples, if you would, of how the schools are easier here or different here than they are in your country.
The thing is that I was first surprised when they gave me the list, the paper, they say, choose 6 subjects. I go, only 6? Because we have 13, 15 subjects.
Yeah,
and then during the week, we've got like 7 subjects a day, and then different combinations of 15 subjects. And so it's like much more studies, and there's only 6.
The other big difference is it will be quick. You can redo your test. That's incredible. I thought I was so happy. I mean,
you can redo your test.
Well, I mean, if you had some tests in school here to do, and you did and got D or C, you can next day you can redo it.
But do you think that when American students finish high school, when they graduate, do they have the same amount of knowledge as you would have if you went to a Russian school?
No, they might have those knowledge, but it's in different way. Some things we don't know, but they don't know more.
They teach them how to be able to create, to think positively, or how to think as be intelligent human being. And then in college, I guess they put all the information inside.
Let me ask you a few questions now about politics. A little bit about the U.S. government and a little bit about your government. First of all, what do you think of President Clinton? He's met with Yeltsin twice.
Yeah, that's great.
That's
really good. Yeah.
You like
that's
that?
Very nice.
Yeah. Do you feel that the United States and President Clinton, this country is committed to helping your country get through this period and make the changes that
hope so. I think our countries feel tied. We're together. We're like one couple, and we can't break up because it's hard. We've been tied up for a long time, being rivals and then being together. it's hard now for either of the countries to break up, and it won't be possible, I don't think so.
Do you think by the time you're adults, in 10 years or so, that Russia will be a different country, that these reforms are going to take hold?
Just Russia needed time.
But how different?
Well, it's definitely going to be different, but maybe not in the way that you are talking about.
Well, how is it going to be? What's going to happen?
It's going to be better. It's going to be like completely different country. But I mean, like 70 years before, it was we were building one country, and
it's take
then
about 90 years.
then everything was broken like at once. It can't be rebuilt in a couple years. It's just like impossible.
Our teachers, our parents are all the time talking that your generation will do all the changes. Everything will go only on your.
See, this is probably our, we're going to try to do it, and we're going to do it because older people now, they don't even think about doing something. They just wait for something, wait, and wait. So it's younger people, I mean, it's us basically who are going to, rule the country and who are going to work for it.
And will you go back now and do you think that the system here, the capitalist system, the economic system that you've seen here, is this something that you think should be brought to Russia or not? Maybe not.
No, I don't think. I don't think that this system would fit our country, because we are completely different countries. This country is really young, and it started to be democratic. It was a country of opportunity from the very beginning. But we have this big history, this long, and we've had like, I don't know how many centuries. It's hard to say how many centuries of history we've had. So, and we have different attitude. We have different nature. So it would be hard to take this system and just to install it in our country. That's why I think we're having problems now, because now they're trying just to install American system. I mean, I'm not saying American, just capitalism in our country. After all these years of socialism, or trying to be socialistic.
See, I don't agree with that completely, because
I think it's the only one way.
Yeah, we don't need to take everything from, the system in America, but the most part, because I think American system is a unique creation of very many different systems from all over the world, because American nation is, is made of different people. So, I mean, and this is what, how people live, and they survive, and they have pretty good lives generally. So I think most of the things we got to take and think about it, and, and use it in Russia, I think.
I think we should create our own system.
Oh, it's not going to be the same that
it's not going to be exactly the same. We should take the best things from all over the world, like the best things from Sweden, from Switzerland, and France, and Eastern countries, and something from Japan and Taiwan. So
okay, but what did you see here that you would want to take? If you could wave a wand and order something...
Banking system, please.
A banking system.
Yeah, this is probably...
Yeah. But now they're not going to work without inflation.
Actually, banking system as a general, because it's real good.
What else?
And
what did you
small
see?
Businesses.
Communication, the post is pretty bad in Russia. Everything.
Better mail system.
A lot better.
One thing I wouldn't take for sure, I wouldn't take public transportation. I would take air companies. I would take Delta, I would take Eastern Airlines, I would take Southern Airlines, but I would never take buses or trains or whatever. Here, that was the problem. That was a real problem.
Yeah.
What could your country offer this country?
Metro.
What?
Metro.
Metro.
Yeah, public transportation.
Public transportation.
Some prices, maybe.
Museums, theaters, ballet.
Do you think it's going to be hard to go back to Russia?
Yeah, it's very...
Why?
Because it will be like so different now. We're coming to a different country even from what we
know where
left.
you're going.
We don't know what we are going to expect there and what is going to happen.
See, it's going to be hard to see more homeless people, more crime. It's going to be more stress
less money.
Less money that everybody has.
Well,
you know.
also it's hard to leave because, well, as for me, I just left so many people in California that I love, and I don't know if I'm gonna be back, and I'm not sure if I see them ever again in my life. But I mean, it's like a part of me stayed there, and I'm turned out. I don't know what I'm gonna do. It's hard. I have two families now. I live in one family, I want to go to the other one, and I live in the other one, I want to go back. So it's being between two countries.
Do you think this was worthwhile for you and for the other students who will participate?
Yeah,
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. That was the best time.
That was probably
great.
that's the best time of
Yeah, that's really great.
Great. Thank you very much.
We close tonight with an essay about Vincent Foster, the White House lawyer who committed suicide a few weeks ago. Shortly after his death, White House officials found a note written by Foster and turned it over to police, but only after a 30-hour delay, which fueled speculation about what was in the note. Police released the text today. It ended with a poignant line: "I was not meant for the job or the spotlight of public life in Washington. Here, ruining people is considered sport." Los Angeles essayist Ann Taylor Fleming has been thinking about the man who wrote those words.
Most of us would never have known his name had he not killed himself. Vincent Foster I'm talking about, Bill Clinton's big handsome aide, his deputy White House counsel, his boyhood friend, who recently shot himself to death near the Potomac River after spending the morning at his White House desk. Many of us mulled the scant details in those first days after. The lack of a suicide note, the insistence by Foster's colleagues and friends that they had no knowledge of his state of mind in those last days. Why would he do such a thing? Why would anyone? Clinton was visibly sorrowed when he first talked to the press about Foster.
We'll just have to live with something else we can't understand, I think.
2 days later, he and Hillary went home to Arkansas to help bury their friend. But Vincent Foster's suicide wouldn't go away. Vince Foster wouldn't. He riveted many of us, especially those of us who were his high-achieving baby boom contemporaries. He riveted us as the dark side of the Clinton dream. Clinton sweeping to power in a nostalgic 60s haze, all shiny and new and plump and full of promise. One of us, sweeping the old guys out of power at last, and sweeping our generation into the big White House, sweeping his longtime friends along with him. Arkansas men like White House Chief of Staff Mac McLarty and Vincent Foster, kind men, bright men, who had lived their entire lives with Bill Clinton as his star rose and they attended his ambitions. There they were at the pinnacle of power, where all those bright young aides of all those presidents had labored before them, Reagan aides, and Johnson aides, and Kennedy aides, long into the night, the lights burning, the speeches to be written, wars to be fought or avoided, messes to be cleaned up, the nation's work to be done in the most exhilarating pressure cooker in the world. Vince Foster couldn't handle it or didn't want to. Such was the story as it began to emerge. A shredded note in his briefcase signaled his depression, and friends and family did know he had been under strain. So Bill Clinton wasn't quite on the up and up, it would seem, when he told us there were no clues.